Welcome to El Zoominario. Today we have Fernando Campos. He is from Juiz, Fora, a city in the southeast of Brazil, where he received his master's degree in computational modeling. He did his PhD degree in biomedical engineering at the Graz University of Technology in Austria in 2012, and he's currently a research associate at King's College London. His research interests are modeling the initiation and treatment of ventricular arrhythmias in the infarcted heart. Okay, thank you so much, Fernando. Please go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, Claudia, for this invitation. Thank you everyone for coming, and also for this opportunity to present the work that we do at King's College London, using computer simulations to investigate and treat cardiac arrhythmias. So the title of my talk is Hasta la vista, baby, terminating cardiac arrhythmias with the help of computer simulations. And before I start talking about what we do, I'd like to say a few words about why we do it. So cardiovascular diseases are still the #1 case of death worldwide, even during the pandemic. And here's some numbers from the World Health Organization, but I like to bring some faces to these numbers to create some empathy, because there are people behind those numbers. If you're a fan of pop rock or heavy metal, you're gonna recognize these faces: George Harrison and Lemmy Kilmister. So they passed away as complications of cardiovascular diseases. If you're a movie fan, you're gonna recognize Carrie Fisher, who unfortunately passed away she had a massive heart attack on a plane when she was promoting one of the latest Star Wars movies. So the message here is just cardiovascular diseases not only kill people in these planets, but also in galaxies far, far away. And more recently, if you like football and you fall in the Euro Cup, you might have seen the football player from Denmark, who collapsed during the football match against Finland. And thank God there were professionals on site, and they were capable to use a defibrillator, and which saved his life. So the goals of our research here at King's is to better understand heart diseases, to improve diagnosis, and to improve treatment. In this talk today, I'll be focusing on improved treatment, so how we use computer simulations to do that. So I'm going to divide this talk in three parts. First of all, I'm going to explain roughly what's a cardiac arrhythmia, how we treat it, and how computational modeling can help. So just like remind you of what your heart does. So it is an electrical mechanical pump that pumps blood into to your brain, to your legs, to your arms, so that you can attend this talk, you can run, you can go for a walk. And the heart is divided in 4 chambers. You have the upper 2 chambers called the atria. There is a right one and a left one, and the ventricles, the lower one. There are also a right and a left. So blood coming from the body with a lot of carbon, lack of oxygen. They arrive at the right part, and then it goes to the left part when it's gonna be pumped for the rest of the body. So there are many fancy movies on the internet how the heart works during regular rhythm, sinus rhythm, and arrhythmia. But the one that I like the most is the cardiac arrhythmia dance. So here you can see how the professor show how the heart works. So his arms represent the upper chambers, the atria, and his legs, the ventricles. So first atria contract, and then pump blood to the ventricles that contracts and blood to the whole body. So this would be a regular heartbeat. So in case of a rogue beat, what we call ectopic beat on the ventricles, you can see that it starts an arrhythmia and a fibrillation. Then the heart cannot contract and synchronously to pump blood. So this is a medical emergency, and you need immediate help with a defibrillation to restart the heart, and then the heartbeat restarts. And then the heart can pump blood again. So what's an arrhythmia? An arrhythmia is a consequence of a disturbance in the heart electrophysiology, in the electrical wavefront that synchronize the contraction per se. It starts on the top of the right atrium, the upper chamber, in a region of cells called the sinoatrial node, propagates to the left atria and then to the ventricles through some specific fast conducting fibers called the Purkinje system. Here we're going to see our first simulation of the day. This is a rabbit heart. This is a computer model. You see some simulations. I removed the atria. You're just seeing the right ventricle and the left ventricle and the fast conducting layer that I mentioned. And on the right-hand side, you can see some arrhythmia. So this is uncoordinated movement of this electrical wavefront that leads to some contraction that is not optimal. So the patient can collapse as a result of not being able to pump blood properly. As you can see in black, these are scars resulting from a myocardial infarction, which is the focus of this talk today. I'm going to only talk about arrhythmias in patients with a history of a heart attack. So how is now that you know what's an arrhythmia, how do you treat it? The first line of treatment of an arrhythmia is medication. So there are a lot of drugs in the market. They're used to control rhythms and prevent arrhythmias to start or to stop them in case they start. There are a lot of problems with medication, mainly side effects, and that can be really, really bad for the patient. And one side effect is instead of preventing an arrhythmia, a drug can induce an arrhythmia in some cases. The second line of treatment is they use an implantable cardioverter defibrillator, which is pretty much the same like the video I showed, but the doctor comes with the defibrillator. But this one is small that lies underneath the skin of the patient. This patient so is having arrhythmia. It has get that implanted, and what it does, it monitors the heart, and if it detects an arrhythmia, it's gonna just deliver a shock. But there is a problem with that because patients describe this shock as being kicked in the chest by a horse. Just so strong this shock is because it has to, it needs a lot of energy to restart the heart. However, neither two of those two treatments, medication or the ICD, can cure an arrhythmia. It just can manage it. The only curative treatment at the moment is called catheter ablation. In this procedure, the patient who is having arrhythmias at home is brought to the hospital, where the doctors are gonna insert some catheter into his heart. To do that, they just make a small incision at the groin, to the leg, and get a catheter all the way up and into the heart. And as you can see here, this is how it looks like during the procedure. What they do, they go to with the catheter, they move it around in the heart chamber, so on the wall of the heart chamber, and they start collecting signals like those you can see here on the left-hand side. Based on these signals, we can extract some features and make a map, which is called an electrical anatomical map of the heart. And based on that, the doctors can then, okay, let's look for regions that could be initiating this arrhythmia or can be sustaining it. And once they find this region, they go there with another catheter called an ablation catheter. And if this procedure in the cath lab was an episode of Game of Thrones, someone from the room would just shout Dracarys, and the doctor would ablate it, which is basically you burn the region of the heart that's causing an arrhythmia to destroy that region and restore the heart rhythm. So using radio frequency energy, or you can also freeze it, also with the purpose of killing those cells that are causing the arrhythmia. So there are some limitations with this treatment, although it's really good. About 4 to 5 patients, they have to come back to the clinic in roughly 6 months or 1 year because they again experience arrhythmia. So the ablation was not a success. The problem is the challenging thing about this treatment is that the clinician has to find the optimal locations in the heart where the arrhythmia is initiating. So it's basically detecting targets that need to be ablated, that need to be destroyed to terminate the arrhythmia. However, this is a very risky procedure. Often that requires induction of arrhythmia. So the patient is lying there on the bed and the doctor uses some catheters as the ones measuring. There are some ones that can, some catheters that can inject an electrical current to initiate propagation and electrical wave from different parts of the heart. So they do that. They stress the heart to induce an arrhythmia, so they can map the circuit and try to optimally locate the targets for ablation. But as you can see, if you induce arrhythmia in the patient, that sounds dangerous. And sometimes the doctors cannot do that. They just simply cannot induce. So they need to rely on their experience and other techniques to detect these substrates. And then sometimes they do induce the arrhythmia, but it's not the same arrhythmia that the patient is experiencing at home. So what can we do with the help of computer simulations? We can create a virtual heart, a virtual version of the patient's heart in computers, which it's often called creating a digital twin. It's a simplification, but it's a name that's been catching. So we create your heart and take a copy of your heart to the computer, and from there we can do whatever we want. We can forget about this little thing called ethics that you cannot do in experiments or in patients, and we can simply paste the heart and make it sicker, shock it in the computer. So and based on that, we can then look for areas that are causing the arrhythmia and detect the targets and tell the clinician, ablate there. And perform virtual ablation, and then try again to induce the arrhythmia, which is the normal procedure, to see if this heart is still able to sustain an arrhythmia. So to the third part of the talk, so how can computational modeling help? First of all, what is a computational model? So my computational model is a very sexy mathematical equation, which has a physical meaning. In this case, here is electrical activity in the heart, and it's solved by a computer. That's why computational model. Actually, we use supercomputers because these models are very complicated and they take a long time to run, to do a simulation and generate a lot of data. So now I'm going to show you some equations that the part of the talk that I lose the audience. So prepare yourself. I'm going to be showing some equations. Okay, so let's start easily with some very simple, with a very simple example. Here, just to remind you, so help you remember what's a function. So we have here a parabola, and we have the x-axis and the y-axis, which is the function. The x-axis is called the domain, so it's the values that we can choose, and then we compute x squared, then we have 2 squared is 4, minus 2 squared is also 4, and then we have a parabola. So the x is called the domain, and then we have the function. And it can have a biophysical meaning. If you go on holidays at the beach or to the lake, and then you jump, you can see that the movement that you do when you hit the water is like a parabola, but inverted. So the heart is the same, but it's a bit more complicated. Instead of having just one dimension, the heart is three-dimensional and also changes with time. So this function has to describe electrical activity in the heart that changes with time. So in all points of the heart, all chambers. So I'm going to show you now how this function looks like quickly. Oh, yeah, there it is. This will be our mathematical model. Describing electrical physiology of the heart. Do not panic. I'm going to break down this equation for you. You're going to see that's super easy. The first part of this equation, it accounts for a model, a mathematical model of a single cell. The heart is made up of millions, if not billions of cells that are connected. And this part of the equation just describes how currents, ionic currents, potassium, sodium, calcium, flow from the inside of the cell to the outside through the cell membrane, this bilipid layer that forms all membranes in living cells. The second part of the equation just describes how these currents flow from one cell to the other, generating the electrical wavefront that I showed you in the beginning during sinusism or an arrhythmia. The third part describes how these currents flow from the cell to the body, to the blood, and then to the torso. And these are called, they generate electrical field and electrograms that are the signals that are measured by the clinician when they are doing the catheter procedure. And also at the body surface, it's the electrical cardiogram, the ECG, that you can have if you go to your GP, to a regular GP, regular practitioner, the doctor. All right, so now we have the equations, the function, and for the, like in the parabola, we had the equation and we have the x, so we moved from minus to plus. And for this case, for the case of the heart, our geometrical model, the x, y, z, they're gonna be in the heart. So how do we get this geometrical model? We get them from medical images here in London at St. Thomas's Hospital, where we are based. The patients come and they have their heart scanned using either cardiac magnetic resonance imaging or computer tomography. So basically, we take a picture of the heart of the patient, 3D. The clinicians do that, like John Whitaker, who gave me this, who was very nice, gave me this data. And based on that, we take this image and we segment it. Segment is basically color the heart to say, okay, in red we have the muscles, so the cells that contract. In green we have the blood. In gray we have the scar, and some cells that they didn't die during myocardial infarction, but they behave in a not a healthy way. And okay, based on these many images, we can create a 3D picture of the heart, and that's gonna be our geometrical model. So we have the equation, we have the geometrical model, and then we can then do a computer simulation, which is basically solve this equation based on this geometry. Just to have give an idea, it has millions of points, this mesh. It takes 12 hours to 24 hours just to run a single heartbeat, and we are lucky to have access to supercomputers, clusters, so we're running these in many computer nodes, which generate a lot of data that we use after that post-processing to create the maps and define ablation. So how actually we can use these models to treat cardiac arrhythmias? Remember the limitations I told you with the catheter ablation procedure. So we need to induce arrhythmia. It's very hard to detect the targets. That's the cause of the poor success rates. Again, so using computer simulations, we can then stimulate, again, and induce the arrhythmia and map. So we're gonna do that now with a simple example, how we do that in a virtual heart. What you can see here is the left ventricle of a patient who had an infarction. So in black here is the scar. You can see it's very complex. I'm only showing the left ventricle because that's where the significant arrhythmias start, the dangerous one, because the left ventricle is the one pumping blood to the body. So what we do here, we just go with a catheter and stimulate the inject electrical current here. We stress this heart and try to induce an arrhythmia like they would do in the clinics with the patient. And as you can see here, we can see this chaotic electrical wavefronts traveling around. And the question is, how do we treat this patient? How do we ablate to get rid of, to terminate this arrhythmia? So we're just gonna do like they do during a procedure with the patients. We're gonna map this arrhythmia. We're gonna take the signals generated from the simulation, like this one here, typical electrogram. Based on that, create the map, detect the targets, go there with a virtual catheter and ablate the region and see if the arrhythmia is terminated. So here, I'm not going to go into details how we construct these maps. That's one of the topic of our research, how we take the signals, extract features, and create the maps and tell the doctors ablate here. So I'm not going to go into details today because of a question of time. So in this case here, you can see the inner part of the heart, so the interior of the left ventricle, and we computed the map, and we're telling the clinicians ablate there. And then we go, ablate, that we're going to generate some ablation lesions based on the shape of the catheter, and we ablate inside the heart and also from the outside. In this case, that's why you can see these small spheres. And what we do then is try to induce the arrhythmia again in the ablated heart, just repeating the same pacing protocol. So stress this heart again and see if we can generate an arrhythmia. And as you can see here, unlike the the previous heart without the ablation. So the ablation is terminated, so this patient can go home, and there is no risk of an arrhythmia anymore. So arrhythmia terminated. So this would be a case of success, a patient that we were able to identify and successfully ablate, treated. So the summary of my talk today, as I mentioned in the beginning, divided in 3 times. I'm very happy when we ended this seminar. If you remember a little bit what's an arrhythmia, how we treat it, and how we can use computer simulation to do that. So this would be the take-home message. So some acknowledgements. This is my research group here in London, the CMERGE group, Cardiac Electromechanic Research Group at King's College. What I showed you here, it's not one-man work. I didn't do that by myself. There is a lot of collaboration with clinicians, with people doing the image, with people doing experiment. It's a lot of work that went into that, and many thanks to them. And that's the St. Thomas Hospital here in London. I'm very privileged to work there. My window view is actually the Parliament, the Big Ben. It used to be before the pandemic, since now most of us are still working from home. And thank you very much for your attention. That would be my presentation, Claudia. And the next step, it's talking about a little bit of my region. So I don't know if you want to stop the recording now.
It's usually part of the recording, but if you want, we can remove it.
No, I'm happy with it. I'm happy.
Okay.
With it.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. So I'm from Brazil originally, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my region, where I come from. So Brazil is divided in 5 regions. The Northeast, which is very famous for its paradise beaches. The North, which you might hear a lot in the news, especially now during the conference here in Scotland about climate change, where the Amazon forest is. And not only the forest, but all the animals and big snakes that live there. In the Midwest, we have also some forests, very unique forest there. And it's also a big center of agriculture in Brazil. So we have a lot of cattle there and also big snakes. In the South, we don't have the snakes, just the cattle. So they have the cattle that they have different predator. So the South is very famous for barbecuing, very close to Argentina. But I come from the Southeast. So every time someone asks me, where are you from in Brazil? I say, I come from the Southeast. And the Southeast is divided into 4 states. So São Paulo in red, Minas Gerais in green, Espírito Santo in yellow, and Rio de Janeiro, which is the most famous one. I'm from Minas Gerais, which is a state where you can fit roughly 1.5 the size of Germany, just for you to have an idea how big this is, the dimensions in Brazil. And I come from a town which is in Minas, but very close to Rio. So every time everyone asks me, oh, I'm from the town in the southeast, very close to Rio, 180 kilometers for Brazilian standards. That's very, very close. So I like to say that I'm from here because, you know, everyone knows Rio, beautiful landscape, football, carnival. So it's nice to relate to that, but Minas is not famous for that. So we don't have sea. So we had to compensate. So Minas actually is famous for church and history because it's the name of the state, it's Minas Gerais, which you translate to general minds. It's where in the 17th century gold was discovered. So a lot of Portuguese went there and a lot of people went there to dig for gold. And a lot of these golds, they were shipped to Europe, but also used inside the church there to make very beautiful and expensive churches. And these churches were built in cities, in colonial cities that are still look like from that time. Very, very beautiful, very pleasant areas surrounded by mountains and by nature, a lot of culture. And Minas is most famous for its cuisine. If you go to Brazil, you want to experience proper food, culture, cuisine, you have to go to Minas Gerais. And I'm from there, I'm biased. So you can, maybe some of you know Anthony Bourdain, which was a very famous chef that traveled around the world trying food and experiencing culture through food. And he had many shows, successful shows. And one episode, he went to Minas Gerais just to try the food. And I really recommend the show. And if you go to Minas, visit the cities and try the food. Not gonna regret it. You're gonna have a great experience. And last, I just found out that they had a pool in Brazil, and the accent from Minas Gerais was just selected the most attractive in Brazil. So another reason to go there, if you speak Portuguese, to listen to how we speak. So that's pretty much what I had to say. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Claudia, for inviting me here. And I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Fernando.